Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the 401 Access Denied podcast. I'm the host of the episode, Joe Carson, Chief Security Scientist and Advisory CISO at Delinea, and it's a pleasure to be here with you today. I'm really excited about today's episode, something I've been excited for a long time. And I'm actually joined with an amazing industry veteran, expert, and awesome person, and also one of the persons who I always enjoy listening to your talks. So, James, welcome to the episode. Welcome to the show today. Can you give the audience a bit of introduction background about yourself, and maybe you can even throw a few dad jokes in if you have some at hand?
Oh, Joe, you're asking for a lot. No, man after my own heart. So, hello everyone. My name is James McQuiggan. I'm a security awareness advocate over at KnowBe4 and a regular contributor to Joe Carson's bank account now that he's said all these wonderful, amazing things about me. I had to look around when he made the intro, but no, I appreciate the warm introduction, Joe. It's always a pleasure to see you out on the speaking circuit. And thrilled that you asked me to be here today to chat with you about human security and security awareness and everything else that we're going to talk
Absolutely.
about.
I mean, we're in a world. I mean, for today, I think it's one of the things we've talked about for a long time is that it's no longer just about technology. And I always love Miko's comment when he did, a few years ago. He talked about, we're no longer protecting and securing computers today. We're protecting the society. And I think that represents a really, a shift in where we've really come over the years, where businesses are no longer it's no longer just about the technology. It's about how it's all being used together. And the human side of things is such an important part of the security strategy for organizations. And really, kind of, this is where we start thinking about is what things can we do to better protect and make their lives safer. And it's not just about being in the office, but it's also when we have people working remotely, working from home. It's about how do we protect them in their daily lives. So, what are some of the risks that faces the human side of things? What are the challenges that we face when attackers are looking to compromise? What type of techniques do they use, and how can it be damaging for them?
Yeah. So one of the things with KnowBe4 that I've always been very appreciative of
Mm-hmm.
and a part of, we're dealing with social engineering. We're dealing with the
Mm-hmm.
attacks against the human. And the way that we do that is we help people make smarter security decisions every day. And that has been my mantra
Mm-hmm.
essentially for the last 13, 15 years in going around and helping folks be aware. You know, I kind of equate it to, when you have children and you buy them a bicycle
Mm-hmm.
and you teach them how to ride it. You teach them how to ride it, but you also protect them. You give them a helmet,
Mm-hmm.
maybe some elbow pads. But educating them so that they understand the rules of the road. They've got to be
Mm-hmm.
looking out for certain things, for cars, for people, the way they ride it, and that protective gear as well. So in the event they do fall off, they don't get hurt as bad.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we look at the human when it comes to social engineering, because we still see that is the majority of the attacks that are going on out there where
Mm-hmm.
the cyber criminals are successful, getting into organizations, getting into people's home networks, computers, devices,
Mm-hmm.
they're doing that through some type of social engineering, getting them to do something that they may not want to do in their own best interest, essentially. And phishing is, of course, that big way, whether it's phishing with vishing,
Mm-hmm.
voicemail or text messaging,
Yep.
looking to gain that initial access into the system.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the time it's going to be emotionally driven. People
Yep.
either in a rush, they are distracted. We're smart, we're educated people. We can walk down the streets of New York, and if someone walks up to us and is trying to sell us a Louis Vuitton bag or a Rolex watch, we're going, yeah, no, I don't think that's real, and keep
Mm-hmm.
walking. But a lot of the time people with email miss that opportunity. They're distracted. Again,
Yep.
they're
And you find that a lot of the times it's like literally, the most common time is the end of the day when you're trying to get away, you're trying to get
yeah,
home,
yeah,
you're trying to do your daily chores, or it's a Friday afternoon.
right.
They really have optimized when you're most vulnerable, and they
Yeah.
also know what words to use as well to
Mhm.
to raise that sense of urgency or fear
Right.
that kind of
Right.
comes with those as well.
And we're seeing now, for years we've always talked about watch out for bad grammar, watch out for
Yeah.
bad spelling mistakes, because usually it's been written by somebody that doesn't speak English or has English as the
Hmm.
first language. And that's, in the English speaking world. But now with generative AI booming in the last year,
Hmm.
that kind of takes that off the table. That the cyber criminals have leveled up, so to speak,
Yep.
with regards to their attacks. So we as humans have to do the same. As users, we've got to be able to do the same, level up our awareness. If we're feeling rushed,
Mm-hmm.
even a colleague of mine was in a taxi in an Uber going to the airport and got an email that came from Uber,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't. It was a phishing
Yep.
simulation. For me, it was right before lunchtime. I was waiting on a call and I got a Zoom email
Mm-hmm.
that said someone was connected, and I ended up clicking on the link, and it was one of our
Mm-hmm.
internal phishing assessments. But again, being distracted, being not taking that time to go through,
Yep.
because it only takes the one time. And a lot of we've heard arguments where people are saying, oh, well, then security awareness, it's pointless, it's useless
Mm-hmm.
if people are still going to click on the link. Security, and and your audience is going to
Yep.
know that security is all about reducing risk, whether cyber, physical, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at reducing that opportunity for cyber criminals to get in. And if you don't do it, well, then you're looking at 1 in every 3 people that are going to click on that link in your
Yep.
organization. You want to be able to bring that down so it's 1 in every 20, 30, 40, 50, whatever, depending on the size.
Mm-hmm.
We want to reduce that risk. And if in the event that it does happen, well, then you've got your incident response plans that are going to be able to
Yep.
deal with that.
Should have
That's where the
additional security
technology,
controls behind the scenes
right?
that really,
Yeah,
mitigate the impact of clicking on something.
exactly.
And you reminded me, it's one of the things that I remember recently when I was at I was at GovWare in Singapore International Cyber Week. And there was the head of the National Cybersecurity Center here in Estonia was also speaking there. And it was really interesting because one of the things, for years, Estonia has pretty much been isolated or protected because of the language.
Right.
The language in Estonian is very complicated. It's a difficult language. There's no gender. There's no future tense. it's
Oh, wow.
so complicated. It's a very difficult language. So
Wow.
it's been somewhat protected because of that for many years, because it's hard to get proper language translations done in order that would actually take advantage. So people were easily detectable at those really bad created phishing attempts, especially when it was using the Estonian language. And it's really interesting to hear him speaking recently, because he was referring to is that is now no longer the case,
Right.
because it used to be where the good phishing campaigns were attackers who had paid proper language translations to do it for them. So when they actually had paid for language, not using machine generated because they were horrible, but paying people to do the proper grammar translations, those were the ones that were actually the better types of phishing campaigns.
Right.
But now with generative AI, the translation is actually almost perfect, and sometimes even better than most people's grammar.
Wow. You're
So,
right. Exactly. Yep.
and that's where you get into is that now Estonia doesn't have that protection anymore because of the language, and now generative AI has really meant that phishing campaigns can be much more accurate, much more difficult to detect the difference between those mistakes that you would have detected before are now being basically masked and removed from the new campaigns. And to the point, one of the things we discussed recently as well is they're also being where it's not just about that first, they're not being opportunistic in the first attempt. What they have is they created a campaign that's multiple communications that
Yep.
builds your trust, that makes it look like an authentic service, and ultimately it's the third email or the fourth email that gets you to click on something
Yep.
or to enter something in. So it is becoming a lot more sophisticated. Generative AI has changed, I would say, the social engineering and phishing and pretexting to being a lot more, let's say, more accessible to more criminals.
Yeah.
Because the criminals before, those who were more sophisticated and more advanced, that's what they were doing anyway. But it's not giving those who may not have the skills or resources to having access to this type of technology.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know, we think of the script kiddie, that
Mhm.
entry level cyber criminal
Yep.
hacker, we call it. And for years people were like, oh, now it's going to make it easier. Well, we've already seen that it's easier out there because you've got phishing
Yep.
as a service, ransomware as a service, essentially cybercrime as a service where you
Mhm.
can go out and pay a little Bitcoin and essentially get access. You show up with your list of people you want to attack, and they've got the platform and the infrastructure to be able to send all that off. So it's
Mhm.
making it easier already for them. They're leveling up a lot.
Yep.
And I know that within the defending space, looking at being able to level up as well using AI within the SOCs and so forth,
Yep.
but needing to level that up, getting our users educated, getting the process, using the technology to be able to identify those emails that are coming in
Mhm.
that are malicious and protect against it.
Absolutely, it is a cyber weapons race. For
Yes.
both attackers and defenders, we're
Yep.
trying to make sure that we're not the gap is not widening. To your point,
Right.
the entry level is lowering every single time,
Yeah.
but we have to make sure that we're upping our game when it comes to the defensive side, and that
Yep.
we're strengthening that where possible.
Right. And
Um,
we've got all these, depending on the size of your organization, you've got all those
mhm,
people, those users that have an email address. And for me, the way I look at it is anybody with an email address in the organization has that proverbial
mhm,
front door key, that electronic front door key to let people in. And a lot of the time, if they click on that link or open that attachment, they're not going to know they've let somebody in. And
mhm,
so it's crucial to make sure folks are aware of that as part of that training. It's not just
mhm,
here, we want you to take this training so, we can check the box and be compliant with whatever security
mhm,
regulation. No, we're looking at defending the organization and protecting it. And a lot of people go, well, that's what IT's for. That's what
mhm,
cybersecurity is for. And you're right, it is. They're there to help protect the organization. But while you have a key to the front door, you have a
mhm.
responsibility as well to be able to protect your inbox and
Absolutely.
not, and that's why we're educating you on these. And if you've got campaigns and organizations where you are doing those assessments, you want to make sure there are rewards there for it. Whether you're doing like a top 10
Mhm,
phishing spotter or something like that, being able to kind of help the human aspect with rewarding them goes a
mhm.
lot further than blaming them because they click on a link and you call them the weakest link, which is the biggest pet peeve for me.
Yeah, that's almost became like such an evil thing in the industry
Oh yeah.
these days.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
which is it's correct. I think we have to realize over the years is that
Yeah.
most employees, their intention is good, is well
Yeah.
being, is to do their
Yep.
job, to get their tasks
Yep.
done, and ultimately, and they rely a lot. They assume that security is working for them in the background. They assume that the IT and the security team has their back, and then
Yep.
they find out that something got through, it's in their
Yeah.
front, and it looks legitimate, and they do something, and all of a sudden it brings the business down. And it's really important. Your point is one is the education side,
Mhm.
and also making sure that they're one. I remember years ago, one thing I was asked. I was standing in an audience. Well, I was actually presenting to the audience. I wasn't in the audience, and the audience was teachers, parents, and law enforcement. And it was all about that time. Was discussion was around cyberbullying and
Mhm.
mental health issues, and there's one person who asked me if there's one thing that I could ever say to the entire audience that would make a difference. What would that be? And
Yeah.
I was put on like on the stand at that point. I'm like, okay, this is you've got the lights, and you've got parents and teachers and law enforcement. One thing would satisfy all of them. What would kind of make it the most impact? And I was thinking about it, and I thought about make sure that you're never afraid to ask for help. Make sure you're never afraid to ask for advice. If you see something,
Sure.
speak up.
Say something. Yeah.
Because it reminded me of it was a phishing campaign, the penetration test I did not long before that. That one that basically the employees they talked so much to each other
Mhm.
that because of that communication they had, they were able to detect suspicious activity really fast because they communicated. They were not
Right.
afraid to ask for advice or to ask for help. And I think sometimes that makes a big difference. And I think what you mentioned that important is make sure that they're equipped and they know who to communicate to.
Yep.
That if they see something suspicious, that they're not afraid, they're not victimized, they're supported. It can be rewarded in different ways. So making sure that and that makes it changes the culture within the organization as well to being something that people feel that they're all working together and you're
Right.
not basically isolated. It's a teamwork in many cases, and that's one of the most important things here. Going back to one of the things I'd like to in a lot of phishing campaigns, some can go really well and some can go bad. What's your recommendation in regards to what is the best practices or good tips, and what things should organizations avoid when they're starting to think about doing a phishing campaign in their organization?
Yeah. A lot of it comes down to knowing your audience, uh, and knowing who your users are for your
Hmm.
culture. You're going to go through. You're going to send phishing assessments out. They're going to be upset because if they end up clicking on the link and they fall victim to it. I kind of have this whole thing on 4 stages of phishing grief, where you kind of the user is going to go through and be shocked that, oh my gosh, what happened? And then denial of, oh, I didn't submit anything. I closed it down really way. It's not bad. And then they get angry because now they've been reported. They've
Caught
now
up.
been told they got to do training. They're angry at the IT guy for
Yeah.
taking away from their productivity. They're angry at themselves for falling victim to it. And then eventually you get into that acceptance phase where it's like,
Mhm.
okay, fine, you got me, and I'll do the training and I'll move on. And a lot of the time, there's that misconception of folks thinking that it is a gotcha moment. Hey,
Mhm.
we're trying to trick you. We want you to fall victim to it. And it's an educational
Mhm.
opportunity where we'd rather have you fall victim to our phishing assessment than a real one
Mhm.
with the bad guy. We're looking to educate you, if, and there's a point where a lot of people think that, oh, great, I'm going to click on the link, I'm going to
Mhm.
get fired. And that comes from an organization's policy. What does your policy say?
Mhm.
Yes, people make mistakes. It's a given. We're human. But how long does it take where they click a link, they get educated, they do it again, they
Mhm.
have a chat, they do it again, and if it's habitual and continual, then there has to be the discussion of, okay, we need you to value the security of the company. And if they can't
Mhm.
do that, then there's a separation. And a lot of the time people think there's been the misconception of, oh, they do it once and I fire them. It's like, no,
Yeah. It
you
should be
want
a,
to have a plan
it's an
like
educational
any performance.
opportunity. It's an
Right.
educational opportunity to kind of
Extremely
highlight and
educational. Yep.
to
Yep.
show the areas that they potentially use
Yep.
to spot,
Right.
and be able to indicate. One thing
Right.
I remember using in one of the phishing campaigns in the past was to make sure that the employee understands is that this is something that just doesn't help them in the workplace, but it can also they can take home with them
Oh,
and
sure.
protect them
Yep.
in their personal
Yep.
lives, and really expand it. And maybe they can go back and educate their family, their kids, their
Hmm.
parents, and
Yep.
and so forth. So sometimes it's important kind of step is that we're here to educate you because cyber attacks don't just target the organization you work in, but it also targets you at home,
Right.
and they take opportunistic, and that could be if you don't learn from this. What happens is what is your personal computer? What if it's your bank account? What if it's your
Right.
identity
Yep.
outside of the organization? So always take it as an opportunity that this is, it's about protecting society,
Yep.
but it's through the business as a means of achieving that.
Yeah, I did a presentation the other day, and somebody was asking, "Well, this is great, because of all the training information they
Hmm.
had at this conference." And they said, "This is great, but how do people that don't work are in those environments to get that training? How do we educate them?"
Hmm.
And again, and going to your point, a lot of that is you need to be able to spread the word. You have to be ambassadors of it. This is to become the norms within society. Be aware of phishing links. I mean, my father-in-law will call up and talk to his daughter, my wife, and say, "Hey, I got this strange email today where it wanted me to do this survey to win some like AirPods," and he goes, "But I didn't do it because you guys have told me don't. If it's too good to be true, don't be following it, and to question things if you're not expecting it or it seems strange or unusual, going
Hmm.
through and looking at that, but having to educate that." But that's one person because through of who what I do
Yep.
through my wife. But there's thousands of other people that don't have that opportunity, and so it needs to be something where yeah we're learning it at work, and it should be something we need to be sharing because
Hmm.
everybody's got a smartphone, or pretty well almost
Yep.
everybody's got a smartphone, got email, surfing the internet, buying things, streaming, list goes
Hmm.
on and on and on. But we're not, it's like we've gotten the bike, we're riding it, but we haven't learned how to ride on the road. And
Hmm.
if something happens, then we get hit by something on the road.
Yep.
So it's a matter of being able to spread that along, and especially depending on the people who you're talking to, because a lot of the
Hmm.
time we're trying to grow that security culture, that
Yep.
norm. Not only is it checking links, but making sure password managers or
Hmm.
strong passwords,
Yep.
using MFA wherever possible, having that mindset of protecting our accounts,
Hmm.
protecting our data overall is what we're looking to do. But a lot of folks just don't have that understanding, that
Hmm.
awareness of it, and so it's a matter of trying getting them educated and then spreading the word through friends, through family, down to your kids, so that they're aware. Because even my two daughters
Hmm.
out there in the world, whenever they text me and go, "Hey, what's the Netflix password or the password for Disney Plus?" It's in the password manager, and they're like, "Oh,
Yep.
right, okay," and then they go and they check it. But again, and I've asked them, I said, "Do a lot of your friends do this? Use password managers or MFA?" And they're like, "I think so." And then they come back and go, "Yeah, not
No,
really."
they're not
So
using it, and
it's
they're using something simple. I think we're in the same situation as even my kids as well. Is that I've got them hammering into password managers, and
right.
and the sharing, and and creating complex passwords and using multi-factor authentication. They've got it driven into them. But I get shocked when I hear that what things their friends are doing. I'm just like, okay, and
Yeah.
are you educating them? And I think one of the things you mentioned really important is ambassadors.
Hmm.
I used to call it cyber mentors, ambassadors,
Right.
lots of different names for it. I think that's really vital for organizations to establish a really, within the organization and even within peer organizations, is to really establish this cyber ambassador program as much as possible. Because the more, and one thing I remember when I was doing one of these programs many years ago, I was asked about who's the best people in the organization to become these cyber ambassadors. And sometimes we think about it, sometimes it's the techies, the geeks
Hmm.
within the community and the
Yep.
organization. But I actually found it was victims.
Oh,
Victims
okay.
were previous victims because they
Okay.
know what it means to be a
Yeah.
victim.
Yeah.
And
For me, for me, it was always the
yeah,
admins
admins,
in the departments,
yes,
because they're always there. Everybody comes to them with issues or questions. They're well respected.
the
No,
gossip. Yeah,
as
they're the
with other
gossipers. The
professions.
gossipers, the
Yep.
ones that kind of
Yep.
are the go-to, that have the
Yep.
knowledge about everything that's happening within the
Yep.
department.
Yep.
Absolutely, and
But the victim certainly
uh,
brings a unique perspective, because yeah, they've gone through that phishing grief, or they've gone through that grief
yes,
of an attack, and they can share that experience. And when you share stories with people, that's how it sticks.
it becomes
That's
more impactful.
It
It,
becomes
it
more
really
impactful. The
raises,
emotions. Yep.
and also gets to the point where when people are telling this is what happened, it's like, when you have a real life scenario and they can
Yeah.
tell you basically the challenges they went through, it really makes a difference when they have those examples. I always found it was one of the things that really raised the importance, and people listen more,
Oh yeah.
and really kind of really took action.
And stories have that emotional aspect to drive it home,
Yeah.
and they remember that. They remember the stories over the facts.
Hmm. So, so we're going through, phishing. I think absolutely social engineering, big topic, phishing, all of those things. For an organization, I think this ties a little bit into the ambassador side of things and the mentor side. What's some of the best practices for an organization who really wants to establish a cyber awareness program across the organization? And not just to make it, I'm not a big fan of ones who just do it for the checkbox approach to meet
Right.
the
Right.
compliance once a year. I'm not a big fan of that. I think it's just you're in that moment in time, and that's what your goal is. But the rest of the year, you're not paying attention. It's a bit
Right.
sometimes, but like,
Right.
we have Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and it's 1 month, but you should be cyber aware all the time. so,
Exactly. Yep.
um, so getting into, so what's some of the best practices for organizations who's going down and thinking about an awareness program for the organization? What would you recommend that the things that they should prioritize and do?
Yeah, certainly when it comes to your security awareness program, having a program that you're just not repeating every year. You're not having the same training every year. You want to be refreshing it.
Mhm.
You want to be doing training throughout the year. Do it frequently. One of my favorite analogies is the fact that you can't go to the gym one day out of the year and expect to have that muscular tone, packed body, right? No,
Six
you
pack,
six pack. Yeah,
beach body, ready
right.
to go.
Yep.
Yeah,
So a lot of it comes down, but you got to go to the gym like 3 times a week, right? Or 4 times, or depending on how fit you want to get, because it's repetitive. You've got to go through. You can't learn how to play the violin in one lesson. It takes years, because you've got to go through and repeat it.
yeah.
With security awareness, we want to be repeating it. We don't expect to make everybody cybersecurity experts, but by doing, smaller training throughout the year,
Mhm.
that's going to kind of help keep it front of mind, because of the fact that, everybody has an email address. Yes,
Mhm.
this is a reason why we need to keep it front of
Yeah.
the security front
Sometimes
of mind with you.
bite size and iterative.
Yep.
That's
Little
things
10-minute
that people
videos.
consume. Yeah.
Yep. And doing that. So the frequency is one part. The other thing that when it comes to security awareness that I always like to say is team up with your communications and marketing team, your PR team, if you've got them, because their job is all about getting a message out, getting a word out, whether it's the product of the company or a service. Well, you've got a service, you've got a product that you want to get out to your users in your organizations. Work with them. They're the experts on that.
Mhm.
And they can help you develop those campaigns of, when are you sending out newsletters? When are you sending out emails?
What language you use in the
What
communication?
language, what culture, right? Exactly. What culture are you going to have? Are you a global
Mm.
organization, versus just being, a one domestic organization? But then have different trainings go out, different newsletters, videos, stagger that. And then also have it specific to the different people in your
Mhm.
organization. Your executives, their time is valuable. So you've got to limit that.
Yep.
You've got your practitioners, whether it's HR or your finance folks, they're going to
Hmm.
be more subjected more to those business email compromise, the vendor invoice,
Yep.
those kind of things. But then overall for the users, you want to be going through not only with the training, but
Hmm.
then doing those phishing assessments as well, going through and making sure folks are being able to spot
Hmm.
not only the phishing email, but then reporting it as well. Because that's the other key element a lot of people sometimes miss, is the fact
Hmm.
that, yeah, you're putting it out there, but they need a way to be able to report it back in, whether it's real or not,
Yep.
because that's a stat of showing the positive. That's showing people reporting it. They're
Yep.
doing the action. When you have that, what we call our fish prone percentage, where people, it's the number of your percentage of clickers, that can have that negative impact, because then people are like, oh, I was part of that fish prone
Yeah.
percentage, and then
So
they feel down. But if they feel that they're one of the the users that report more, then they're like, hey, I know I'm doing my job. I'm doing good. I'm protecting the organization. That carrot versus the stick goes a long way as well. So folks um, feel a lot more pride in their organization, and that helps drive the culture.
mhm.
It helps drive those norms, which are contributing to the behaviors overall to getting a stronger security culture.
Yep.
Because we've been doing, people have developed bad habits, I hate to say, with
Yep.
regards to email and internet, and not being as secure minded as they could be. And so having to change those habits, that's what takes
Mhm.
time, and that's what takes the frequency to be able to go through and do that continuously, so that you build up that culture, build up those norms. So folks are like, oh no, you got to change your password. You used a weak one. Oh, hey, you should use the password manager that we have in the
Yeah.
organization. And they're
Let's,
like, oh,
let's
okay, all right.
automate it and move it into the background,
Yep.
and let's
And then
let's let's,
hopefully
let's take
that
away the pain of passwords.
sticking with the pains from passing. Yeah. But then
So
that's hopefully then that carries home. It's like, oh, I get a password manager here at work and I can use it at home.
but
Okay. Well, I like
that's
using
such
it
an
here.
important thing. I always say that expanding your security solutions to people's personal
Mhm.
lives
Yeah.
goes a long way. And
Yep.
I always remember somebody mentioned to me, a really wise person quite a few years ago, had mentioned to me is even similar, going back to what Miko's statement that I mentioned about we're securing society these days,
Right.
not just computers. It was also about we're only secure as as the social sphere around us,
Mm-hmm.
and the more we push that social sphere outwards, the more secure society becomes.
Society becomes, yeah.
Yeah, and
Yep.
that means that security doesn't just start in the office or with your employees. It starts with their family and the people around
Right.
them. And the
Yep.
more you can push security into those environments,
Mm-hmm.
the bigger impact you can have. And that's what we're also saying in even supply chain. Many organizations are going, well, if you want to be a supplier, we're going to expand our security solutions into your environment as well,
Mm-hmm.
so that they can make sure that they're getting that supply chain and social sphere again,
Right.
because they know the more they push the boundaries outwards, the more difficult it is for attackers to be successful.
Exactly.
So,
But
and you reminded
you're
me,
only you're
yeah,
only as strong as your weakest vendor security program.
exactly. And you reminded me of an interesting one. One of the things that when I did phishing campaigns many years ago, one of the things I always wanted to know as well was not just focusing on the people who clicked, because I understand, because
Right.
that was the initial intent, is to get
Right.
is to do it such a way that you're playing on time, fear, fear of doing something wrong, the urgency, sensitivity, and all of that stuff. There's techniques and really well kind of constructed methods to get it, and looking at very authentic as well. I was always one that I always wanted to also ask the people who got it but didn't click on it, because I was
Mm.
always curious. Did you see it?
Right.
What did you identify? You didn't. You maybe didn't report it. So also going through that, I think it's really important to also get
Mm-hmm.
those who did see it, didn't report it, and understand the reasons and intentions behind that as well, because that can also be a powerful measurement into understanding about
Sure.
what was the thing that you did that
Right.
made them not interested. Um,
Sometimes it could be a matter of they forget. I know for me, when I'm on my phone and I get an email that
yeah,
comes in and there's something, it looks a little suspicious or something
yeah.
about it, I'm a little hesitant about trying to preview the link on my phone, because you got to hold it down to pop
Yeah,
the link.
it's more tricky
Yep.
to let's say look for the indicators of compromise on mobile devices than it is
Right.
on
Yeah.
traditional laptops and desktops.
And so my rule to myself is, all right, if there's something weird, I'm going to look on it on my desktop
Yeah.
computer through a browser when I have and I can hover over and I can check it.
Mhm.
And other times, emails come in and it just gets weighed down and then it goes on the next page and then you forget
Mm.
about it. So,
You know,
I know for me, sometimes if it doesn't get reported, it's because it's out of sight, out of mind. And,
you you get so many emails. You're so popular that it's hard to keep up. So
yeah,
I think popular people who get so many emails is hard to it's hard to keep track of them.
or it's all the
Um,
vendor emails from the conferences. Yeah.
possibly. So, and that reminded me as well as one of the things that getting into. I remember talking about the cyber awareness training side,
Mhm.
and going through into that whole social sphere side. One thing that was really interesting is many years ago, I remember doing this. I was there to do a risk assessment
Mhm.
and do a strategy for improving it. And every part of the every different team that came in, they had their part to do. I was looking at patch management and looking at the inventory of those and how much systems had been up to date patched. Others were looking at software programs and password management stuff. There's lots of different people working in different areas. And ultimately, we realized that we need to do security awareness training program with a certain high risk users was ultimately one of the goals. So we went through and we had a plan. It was a 6-month project. You put all the things around it, all the resources, and then went through and started, doing this awareness training. And it was a disaster. Employees hated it. You're taking them away from their job. They're not able to do the
Right.
tasks. They were unhappy. They weren't listening. We had all of these very well legally drafted, policies and messages, how important it was, and it was just disaster. We were creating so much. It was like huge friction between
Right.
the employees and the security team, and it was just basically turning into just mayhem and chaos. And I remember one of the days we're sitting and we're just going, we're failing. What are we going to do? And it was an interesting time because at the same time, it was actually the same day, it was actually bring your child to work day. So it was like a parent bring your kid to the
Yeah.
office.
Yeah.
And we're sitting there and we're all out of ideas. And we thought, and somebody came up with the idea says, why don't we ask the kids? Maybe they
Sure.
have a better idea than we do. And it was interesting because what happened was it was like, so we went and got permission. Can we go and present to the kids? It was a bit of an awkward moment because when you're going to present to these all different ages of kids, you'd like really,
Right.
really young kids and older kids. And we went in and we presented our awareness program and they were just looking at us in shock. Going like, and it was complete disasters. And they were going, and we were looking for ideas. How can we make this better? And one of the kids raised their hand and said, why don't you do it like, we don't, all this text doesn't make sense to us. It's very complicated. The words are way beyond their understanding. They said, why do you do it in comics, like graphics and images? And we thought, that's an
Wow.
interesting idea.
There you go.
And it
Yeah.
really kind of, so we're like, okay, this is something we haven't tried and something that's interesting. So we end up creating a series of little comic stories
Mhm.
that highlighted the different risks and issues with some of the techniques, phishing, plug in USB sticks,
Mhm.
entering credentials in, changing password. Oh, we create all these little storyboards, and then we realize that actually this is fantastic because we don't have to go through all the translations and all the different countries that this organization operates in. 115,000 employees across many countries, and you're going like this storyboard actually was much cheaper than our original plan that we were going forward. And then it was interesting. So we're actually impressed. We're going, this is amazing. Let's keep this going. Let's find out more ideas. These kids are actually educating us way beyond we ever thought it was even possible. And then we were going, our way of communicating. We sent this through email. We had an internet web page and all this stuff. And they were just like, huh. And another kid raised a hand and said, why don't you put it on the back of the bathroom doors? Because everybody needs to go to the bathroom at least once a day. We know we do. And that was another moment of realization. Was like, huh,
You
that's
got a
quite
captive
interesting.
audience in the bathroom. Yep.
so, so those kids were well treated at the end of the day with plenty of candy.
That's awesome.
And but it was realization that we end up, we had the program, we put in comic stories, we had those on the back of the bathroom doors. We changed them every couple of months. We
Right.
also put them in the canteens because they also said,
Right.
we need to eat.
Common
so,
places. Yep.
but it
Yep.
was amazing that how you can get, outside of your rut and traditional thing that you get
Yep.
used to, and really kind of open your eyes to other possibilities. And that was a moment of realization, that diversity was
Yep.
so incredibly important,
And
and
kids
trying
see
to
the
get
world a
different.
little, and kids see
They
the
too,
world a little
yeah,
simpler.
yes, they do.
So, and that goes, when you can simplify the process, with any type of project, when you can
Hmm.
simplify the process and explain it to a child or explain it to somebody,
Mhm.
senior citizen, somebody that's not in the tech
Yeah.
world, and they can understand it and get takeaways, then your message is communicated effectively.
Yeah, that
So
yeah, that actually the whole session. It's like just a half a day, just sitting and just really
chatting
opened
with
our
them,
minds. And it was for me, it was always one of those enlightening moments. I always say in my
right?
career, and it changed me as a person as well. Just kind of listening to the feedback, and it made that program successful.
That's awesome.
And that was even to the point where that was actually the Cyber Mentor program also was part of that initiative, and also expanding security to that whole thing with the kids also made them realize that security starts at home and expanding
Right.
security solutions to their families.
To the
So they
families. Yeah,
even paid for things like antivirus software or password managers for them to use at home. And I thought that
that's
was an
cool.
impressive way in a kind of really, let's say, modern way of thinking of things.
Right. That's awesome.
So, so quick. So one of the big things in the news recently is around liability, and it's been happening over the years. We saw it with the Uber incident, and we saw it with a few cases, and most recently, of course, now with the SEC charging the
Hmm.
CISO from SolarWinds, all about
Yeah.
transparency. And what's this all happening? Is it something that we start having to realize it's not just about the employees who are becoming victims of incidents, but also now as a result of incidents now the executive team and the leadership of organizations are also what do you think? What's your thoughts around the whole kind of liability from CISOs and leaders in organizations, especially when it comes to security these days?
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I've had many of these types of conversations over the years. And one of the one of the statements that I always heard regarding somebody that would
Mhm.
communicate between the C-suite and the business was the fact that the board of directors, your C-suite
Mhm.
team, they have a larger risk appetite than we're
Mhm.
willing to take on ourselves, and
Yes.
that's why they're in that role. However, I think because we've had so many data breaches, it's like it's so nowadays, it's like, oh, another company got breached. Okay,
Yeah.
all right. There goes all my data and information in the wild. That, now it's the government,
Mhm.
has realized, okay, too many of these organizations have been hit. I think it's because, with SolarWinds and the supply
Mhm.
chain and the downstream of
The
all that.
impact and the government was
Right,
also significantly impacted as part of
right.
that as well. So.
So with that, it's like, okay, organizations need to start taking a little more responsibility, because it'd be like, and it would drive me nuts, because you'd get the letter that would say, we take security seriously. And my response was, you're missing a word. We don't take security seriously enough.
Yeah.
Um, and so now it's putting the feet to the fire of the organization's uh, directors themselves, whether it's the director, board of directors, the owners of the company, whatever it is, but putting their feet to the fire, going, okay, yeah, you took a hit on, because you got hit with ransomware, you paid the ransom,
Yeah.
you had to spend $15 million to recover, but you made 125 million last year. For you,
Mhm.
that was like, okay,
It was a
took
blip
a
for
hit on
many.
the stock, and you kept on going. It didn't put you out of business, where you've got like smaller businesses, some of them, they get hit, and down the road they end up having to close the doors. And getting breached when we've got all that PII out there, that is finally, it's like, okay, this is unacceptable, we have to start
Mhm.
protecting it more. And so by putting in the regulations in with SEC, because that impacts stock price, okay, now you have to do a filing, the 8K filing, and then the 10K for the annual event,
Mhm.
for regarding a type of cybersecurity incident.
Mhm.
And you've got to do that within 72 hours. And I remember people freaking out, going, oh my God, 72 hours, it's not enough time.
It's
Where in the
it's
rest of the
it's
world, they got less. So
yes.
you've got 3 days. And of course, it's down to the wording, you know, and what you declare as an incident when you do that, and so now it becomes, you've got an event. Okay, well, we can carry the word event for a particular time until we declare it an incident. Then we have 72 hours. So they get their ducks in a row.
Yeah.
It's regulation, and we loopholes, and we've seen it go on for years. At least I know I have, with other compliance regulations. But it's, for me now, it's looking at, okay, now, yeah, your risk appetite might be a lot bigger than what we're
Mhm.
comfortable with, but now it becomes the fact that if we have an incident, you can't sweep this under the rug. If there's materiality impacted by this, where it impacts our, PI information, or our customers or organizations, or it could impact stock price, now we're going to be held accountable for it. And so I think this is waking up a lot of board of directors, a lot of organizations, where they don't understand it, and they would just be like, cybersecurity, that's an IT thing. or a CIA, an information office thing. And so they wouldn't take it seriously. And now it's something where we need
But
to have
yeah.
more technology minded people on those board of directors, not only from a risk standpoint, a governance standpoint, but also from a technology, and getting them to understand that down the road.
And I
So
think it comes
hopefully
down
we see
to,
that.
I think it comes down to as well as, we as an industry has been pushing the CISO to be on the board to
Oh
get that
yeah.
visibility.
Yep. Yep.
And it also kind of realizes and it highlights to me that all our most CISOs ready to be on the board from an experience and knowledge perspective, because ultimately it's a very different, to your point, it's shifting the risk,
Right.
and we're not, always willing to accept the risk. It also gets into that, CISOs who are on the board who sign, filings and papers, that they want to make sure that as they're signing it, that they're able to back it up.
Right.
Um,
Yep.
and also then there's a question is that, does from a security perspective, because a lot of times the CISOs put under a lot of pressure in order to make sure they're able, sometimes their hands are tied in regards to make actions and make changes to the point where, does, anything the CISO signed, does it have to be backed up by other board members? So the CISO isn't the
Sure.
only one being held responsible.
Right. Yeah. We don't want them to be the scapegoat. Yeah. This
Correct. And
is,
which
yeah.
was what appears to be,
Right.
the kind of what, the CISO tends to be as a result of this being the one that's liable, and the rest of the board not.
Right.
And this is where it gets into that whole kind of association side. So
Right.
so for me, it's something that I think we've been pushing our way down, but we have to make sure that we're also backing it up with the right training and
Right.
expertise, and that CISOs are getting the right knowledge and support when they're
You're
getting those, because I think a lot of CISOs, it's first time board,
yeah.
kind of, let's say,
There almost needs to be a training course for them to what it's to be like on a board. And I know they're out there
yeah,
and they can go and find other things, but yeah, it's rather than make your. I think I heard the title of this of a presentation recently in a conference was the chief information security officer is the chief information scapegoat officer.
yeah.
You know, so but it shouldn't just be them if they're not doing their job and they're not pushing to get more the technology, the training, the technology training and processes in place and the
Mhm.
people, then yes, then that's a failure on their part. But if they're pushing it through and they're not getting the budgets because the board recognizes the risks
Mhm.
aren't that great for it, then yeah, then it becomes a whole board. But I even with that, and let's say
Mhm.
they get the budgets, there can still be that breach. You can still
Mhm.
have a data breach that can occur. But if you've got the processes in place and being able to mitigate the risk overall, then it
Correct.
may not be as bad. But it's like I said with the security awareness training. Yeah, you still might have you're still going to have people that are going to click on links. It's now if you've got the technology and you've got the processes and the people that can handle that in place, and that goes a long way in mitigating and reducing that attack surface that they've gained access into, and limit what they can get to. So
I completely agree with that statement. It's absolutely, it's really about making sure that you're being honest with yourself when it comes to your
right, that
security
transparency.
capabilities.
Yep.
Is
Oh
ultimately
yeah.
what you're getting to, is that I understand the risks in my environment and I'm accepting them as they are, and I'm
Right.
presenting to the board and they're accepting them, and we have shared responsibility when it comes to it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then you're not falsifying your capabilities to
Right.
people who come your customers. So I think
Yeah.
that's ultimately what I think. We have a lot to go when it comes to making sure that the CISOs out there are ready and have the knowledge and
Right.
make sure that they understand what can come as accountability.
Exactly.
And I attended a great session recently. There's a lot of a couple of CISOs when I was on a CISO summit that I attended, and they were talking about even liability insurance. The
Yeah.
companies taking out just in those cases, that it's now becoming a top discussion. I get a quick question from you. One of the things I've got as well is around what do you see some of the future trends? Where do you see the future of this area going when it comes to the human security? How can we make, I love, the whole CISA, secure by design and shifting left and all of those things. And we got a lot of initiatives. But what can we do to really kind of accelerate this? Is there things, initiatives that you're seeing? Is there anything that No Before is doing around this as well? What's your thoughts around the future trend?
Yeah, I mean, from the security awareness standpoint, we're always having more content and having that available. So different aspects. We know AI is playing a huge
Mhm.
role in with organizations, having training surrounding that. But then also from phishing assessments,
Mhm.
we're utilizing AI and the new capabilities. But also in how you deal with those phishing attacks. And so we have a product called Fish Plus that handles, the triaging of that, removing it, being able to remove it from everybody's mailbox, flip it around and send it back out with your own links to assess folks, because it's a real live phishing email. So yeah, we have our product platform that we've got is, the industry leading with regards to, sending out the phishing emails, dealing with phishing emails, the training of it, overall, the security coach, having those little bite-sized training programs. If you're plugging in a flash drive and your policy doesn't allow it, those kind of things.
Yep.
Get a little quick 3-minute video to help the person understand the risks and what they need to do moving forward. So, yeah, overall, with here at KnowBe4, continuing to focus on the human, getting that security culture raised up within organizations, keeping security top of mind, doing it so that we're looking to change behaviors, but overall we want to reduce risk within organizations. So, reduce that attack surface where, we hear so often that they got in through social engineering. If we can get it so that folks are like, yeah, no, I know that's not real, and not believe everything that comes in on your phone, have that little healthy level of skepticism with regards to your phone, your email, voicemails, and so forth. So,
fantastic. It's ultimately making the world a safer place for us to live in. And I mean, that's ultimately the goal. And is there any resources or any places that you would like, to point people to that can help them?
Sure.
I know Perry has numerous great books, and I've got quite a few of them on my shelf as well. And Stu's also a great advocate. Also, he's always kind of sending out his
the Cyber Heist News. Yep. So, we have the blog site, blog.knowbe4.com. Great. We have stories every day, multiple stories coming out every day. The Cyber Heist newsletter that comes out from that's now on LinkedIn. They were real excited. They got the LinkedIn newsletters out there every week. But going back to what we talked about earlier with regards to getting the word out to people, KnowBe4 does have a home course. You go to knowbe4.com/home course, and it's like a home security awareness training program that people can take. Now, it is password protected, and the password for it is home course, all lowercase. Don't come at me because of the password we use, but that's just to prevent it from being scraped, I believe. And so you've got to have some sort of human interaction. But yeah, you can go out, and that's got training for people and families to be aware of with regards to, security awareness. Share it with your grandparents. It's a series of videos so they can go through and watch that. And again, get that awareness to hopefully, make them think a little more when it comes to those emails and not believing everything coming into their inbox is true. But also from a security professional perspective, I produce the Security Masterminds podcast. So we have our own podcast out there. Every month we interview a new security mastermind that's out there. And we're wrapping up on season 2, and I'm already lining up guests for season 3, which looks real exciting. Looking forward to that. So definitely check out the KnowBe4 website and for all of the products and services, the blogs, the information, and the home course. So
fantastic. I'll definitely make sure as we go through, and all of this gets added to the show notes as well, so it's easier accessible for everyone on the show. James, it's been awesome. I always enjoy having you on, and always enjoy speaking with you and listening to your talks. It's always great to catch up and chat with you. Let's make sure it doesn't go too long for the next chat. So any final words of wisdom that you would like to share with the audience before we close up today's episode?
Just stay safe out there. Have that healthy level of skepticism. We need to have that. We can't just believe everything that we see. Now that we got the holiday season coming up, we're gonna have we're gonna see a lot of scams of shipping deliveries. Don't freak out.
Christmas presents and holiday seasons.
So we got to elevate up just a little bit. And if all else fails, ask somebody.
Don't be afraid to ask for help.
Don't be afraid to ask.
That's the key part. So.
It's a good message to have.
James, it's been awesome having you on. Many thanks for joining me for today's episode. For everyone, again, tune in every 2 weeks for the 401 Access Denied podcast. Here to bring you, educational knowledge, news, trends, things that really help make the world a safer place. And James, you've definitely brought it to the show today, and it's some great knowledge and contribution. Thank you very much. So everyone, stay safe and take care.
See ya.